Hey, random stranger, welcome back. So let's discuss Madoka Magica episodes 5 and 6, and then straight on to watch episodes 7 and 8. Let's go. So Sayaka went through some stuff in the last couple of episodes, just some minor quibbles. My growing impression is that she is just the perfect victim for a Qubey system. I noticed when she became a magical girl, she was standing in this hedge maze, but if you look closely, there's actually no way out. It's just the perfect visual metaphor for how these girls think they have free choice when they're really just pawns being moved around on a chessboard, and not necessarily just by Qubey either. On one level, Sayaka absolutely had a choice. She could have walked away and not made that contract with Qubey. Nobody was holding a gun to her head. But if you dig deeper, you realize that her choice was kind of essentially rigged from the start by a bunch of things beyond her control. Arthur Schopenhauer said this once: a man can surely do what he wills to do, but cannot determine what he wills. There's another famous rephrasing of this by Einstein, who paraphrased it as man can do what he wills, but cannot will what he wills. Sure, Sayaka chose to become a magical girl, but what made her want that choice in the first place? Well, she desperately wanted to help Kyosuke. She was traumatized by Mummy being eaten by a giant clown snake, and she has this very deep-seated hero complex that compels her to prove her own worth by saving people. Given all of that, her personality, the nature of her emotional attachments, could she really have chosen any differently? And I think on one sense, the answer is no. She didn't choose any of those core things about herself, but they are what determined how she responded to Qubei's offer. There were several shots where Sayaka's profile was drawn in shadow while she was saying these very bright, positive things about being a magical girl. The disconnect between the shadow and her very optimistic words, I thought, hint at either some kind of cognitive dissonance or some self-deception happening. She is literally in the dark about her own motivations and also the dangers and risks and that darker underbelly of being a magical girl, while happily talking about being a hero and fulfilling this very glorious destiny. I think Sayaka found it appealing to frame becoming a magical girl as destiny rather than a choice, because if it was a choice, then she'd have to wrestle with some pretty uncomfortable questions, such as whether she really did it for Kyosuke, or because she wants to be seen as a savior. Destiny, on the other hand, feels noble. She gets to be part of something bigger than herself without having to question whether her motives are as pure as they seem. Just to bring in some big guns in philosophy on maybe what they might have thought about this, an existentialist like Jean-Paul Sartre would have said maybe that Sayaka is engaging in what he called bad faith, basically lying to herself about the freedom she actually has. For him, we are all condemned to be free, which means that we always have choices, even if we want to pretend that we don't. Genuine freedom is terrifying because it makes us completely responsible for all of the consequences of the choices we do make. Convincing ourselves that it was fate or it was meant to be or it was destiny becomes a way to avoid that sort of crushing responsibility that you get with being free. Not choosing is also a choice. Sayaka could have said no to Qubey, but that would have been choosing to let Kyosuke suffer and potentially letting more people die that she could have saved. Her hero complex becomes the perfect vehicle for this sort of self-deception. She doesn't just want to help people. She needs to be the one doing the helping. She needs to be special, this pure-hearted in her head magical girl carrying on Mummy's legacy. That's not her just being altruistic. It's also about proving her own worth by carrying out these heroic acts. However, the destined to be a hero narrative gives her a sort of pre-packaged way to feel selfless when it is actually serving some pretty self-centered psychological needs. The twisted part is that Qubey knows how to exploit this mental loophole beyond just manipulating the girls with half-truths and pitting them against each other. They offer an escape from the burden of choice itself by reinforcing the whole "it is your destiny to become a magical girl" narrative whenever it suits its agenda. All of this creates this very brutal paradox that makes Sayaka's arc so compelling. She is simultaneously free to choose and also unable to choose any differently. And I think that is a condition that as humans, we all share. At first, Sayaka loves being a magical girl. Her music-themed transformation obviously reflects her wish for Kyosuke. She finally has all this power to back up the very high-minded moral ideals that she has carried in her head. But there is also something unsettling about how naive her understanding is of what she's actually signed up for. The fact that she can heal faster is also a double-edged sword, I feel. Like, it saved her from dying, sure, but it also makes her more reckless than she already is. Combined with her stubborn pride, like how she wanted to just keep going at Kyouko even after Homura saved her ass. And she is like this ticking time bomb just waiting for the right trigger. I don't think Sayaka's stupid. Like, I think she's just human. She's caught in this system that takes the very qualities that make her admirable. Her sense of justice, her desire to help and protect people, and it just weaponizes them against her. It is a system that wears down and I think eventually corrupts even the best of intentions. Speaking of corruption, enter Kyouko, who represents everything that Sayaka refuses to accept about the magical girl world. Their conflict is way more than just territorial or even about, the veteran versus the rookie. It's really about two radically different philosophies clashing head on. I want to thank Red for explaining how Kyouko is the embodiment of this trope where a new magical girl appears mid-season to kind of show up the other magical girls and to force them to rethink their conception of what it actually is to be a magical girl. But Kyouko also does more than that. They wrote, the way Kyouko plays with the trope is that she takes it to the extreme. She's not just better at being a magical girl than Sayaka, she defeats Sayaka in a magical combat so hard that she would have actually killed Sayaka if not for outside intervention. She's not mildly antagonistic to Sayaka, she does everything in her power to make Sayaka hate her, including murder through willful negligence and threatening people Sayaka loves. She doesn't make Sayaka rethink her stance on magical girls. She goes about being a magical girl in a way that is so completely antithetical to everything Sayaka stands for that Sayaka cannot accept it and must double down no matter what. So it makes total sense that no amount of talking it out was going to solve the issue between those two. Things may have changed, maybe, now that the whole soul gem thing has been revealed. But first, my question to myself was like, why do I like Kyouko so much, even though she is objectively such a terrible person? Kyouko has zero problems letting a familiar escape so that it can feed on humans and mature into a witch, because then she gets a grief seed out of it when she kills it later. And to Sayaka, that is absolutely morally reprehensible. And it is, there's no denying that, but there is always just this small doubt at the back of my mind that Kyouko was never this cold and calculating. I don't know why I have that doubt. My question is, though, what kind of system takes a normal girl and grinds her down until she operates on a pure survival of the fittest logic like Kyouko now does? I don't know if the fact that Kyouko was constantly snacking on things was like a not so subtle allusion to her whole food chain philosophy, the fact that witches eat humans and then magical girls eat witches. Basically, the weak get destroyed by the strong. I also thought the ridiculous length of Kyoko's spear is like comical almost, but then I thought, what if it's symbolic of the emotional distance that she deliberately keeps from everything, including her own feelings? When Sayaka called her out for like being the worst magical girl ever and how she could never compare to Mummy, it kind of did hit a nerve. There was a tiny hint that maybe there was a time when Kyouko cared about being good, but enough suffering and disappointment convinced her that cold pragmatism is the way to go. Like, it's the only way you're going to survive in this world. Maybe Sayaka clinging to a naive idea about magical girls being these heroes annoys Kyouko because it holds a mirror up to her own past of naivete. Sayaka thinks clearly that she is better than all of them, when really she'll just end up as jaded as the rest of them given enough time. For her part, Kyouko kind of called out Sayaka for the selfish underbelly of her wish. Like, it wasn't just about Kyosuke's recovery, was it? And she made her point in just the crudest ways by suggesting that Sayaka should, chop off all his limbs. Not chop off. What did she say? Break his hands and legs so bad he'll never be able to use them again. But I think underneath the crudeness was just this clear-eyed recognition that they are all driven by self-interest to some degree, and pretending otherwise is dangerous. And it's dangerous because when you've convinced yourself that your motives are utterly altruistic, you stop examining your own actions critically. And already we've kind of seen how Sayaka's self-righteousness has become a blind spot that stops her from recognizing when she's being manipulated or when her choices might harm the people that she cares about. I could see her becoming so invested in her image as this selfless hero that she'll really struggle to adapt when reality does not line up with her idea of what is moral and what is right. For example, she may not be able to handle finding out that this is a system where everyone, all the magical girls, yes, even the bad ones, and witches too, are victims. In a sense, that they're all being played and used by Qubey. That links to Kenneth Elder's comment about how a big part of Sayaka's distrust and dislike of Kyouko and Homura is rooted in her idolization of Mummy and this heroic ideal that she embodies. If there is any truth or reason to Kyouko and Homura's much more cynical worldviews, then the meaning behind Mummy's selfless sacrifice would be kind of somewhat negated, and that is a really, really hard truth to swallow. So it's way easier for Sayaka to just dig her heels in and reject their perspectives entirely and just fight against them, just fight it out to the end. Okay, so the big hoo-ha of the last 2 episodes was learning that becoming a magical girl means having your soul literally ripped out and stuffed inside a fancy rock. It was a reveal that taps into centuries-old philosophical debates over some scary, very fundamental questions about what makes humans human. When Qubey just casually dropped the bombshell that Sayaka's body is just an empty shell, it brought to mind René Descartes' idea of dualism, which conceives of the mind and the body as totally separate entities, even though they do interact with each other. So theoretically, our consciousness can exist apart from the body. That's Cartesian dualism. Magical girls are the literal embodiment of that idea, but kind of carried to very disturbing logical extremes, with their souls operating their bodies remotely from these very tiny gem prisons. But then you have thinkers like Maurice Merleau-Ponty, who, although he didn't completely reject Cartesian dualism, emphasized that consciousness isn't some separate thing that's just piloting a meat suit. Like, we don't just have bodies, we are our bodies. Every thought and feeling and moment of awareness is tied to our physical existence. So we understand and we enjoy the world by touching it, like physically, by moving through it, and also just being fully present in our skins. So from that perspective, what Qubey does to the girls is actually this fundamental violation of human nature that is very sneakily disguised as this wonderful gift. And no wonder Kyouko was just horrified, because without them even knowing it, the girls were stripped of the very thing that makes them human and gives the human experience meaning. That is the complete, unbroken connection between the conscious mind and the body. And again, there was this subtle visual language that reinforced the sinister side of their transformation through shots like this, where, you had Qubey riding on Sayaka's shoulder, which resulted in this shadow that looks distinctly non-human. And then there's also this interesting shot where from the silhouette alone, it does kind of look like Kyoko's just killed Sayaka or kind of strangled her. But the real culprit is actually Qubey, who's positioned to the side, kind of like a puppet master, just watching it all unfold. This existential body horror also explains, I think, Homura's cryptic comment about how Madoka should just give up on Sayaka, because trying to save her would be like trying to bring someone back from the dead, which is an odd turn of phrase. And I think you could think of it as, in one sense, magical girls aren't truly alive anymore if you think about them as just souls animating corpses from a distance. And it also explains why Homura has been desperately trying to stop Madoka from becoming a magical girl herself. Like, she's not just trying to save her from, I guess, all the danger that comes with being a magical girl, but also from losing her fundamental humanity. Of course, humanity means nothing to Qubey. Like, to them, being able to separate out the soul from the body completely is like this huge upgrade. Like, hey, like, aren't you glad your meat suits are practically indestructible now and can channel magic so much more efficiently? It is horrible enough to find out the truth of what a soul gem actually is and how it's made and what it does to your body. But equally horrible is Qubei's inability to understand why having your soul ripped out might be just kind of slightly upsetting. And on top of that, it's like the total lack of consent to this being done to you that just makes it all worse. What made this reveal unsettling, I guess, on another level is like how it mirrors real discussions today about potentially achieving immortality through technological means. So in the world of the ultra rich, and inspired by sci-fi, these ideas have been floated, like finding a way to cryopreserve brains so that they can be transplanted into new, younger bodies in the future, or, uploading your consciousness to a computer. None of these proposals have any sort of scientific basis yet. But often they assume the same Cartesian dualism that Qubey exploits, that our self is just information that can be extracted and relocated to another physical host. And I think Madoka serves as this cautionary tale about what we stand to lose if we actually do achieve such separation between the body and the soul. It could cost us the very thing that makes being human and makes existence itself meaningful. Before we say anything about Homura, I would like to reiterate that she had the coolest line ever, and I'm going to read it out. I'm an ally to those who maintain their composure and an enemy to idiotic aggressors. I definitely became a very starry-eyed fangirl at that point. So Qubey called Homura an irregularity, which sounds really cool, and also kind of implies that she has somehow found a loophole in the system that no one else has found. And I love the idea of Homura being like this glitch in the matrix, screwing up Qubei's plans and operating totally outside of his control. The more we see of Homura though, like the more you can tell that she carries a very heavy burden of guilt. Like she's done something terrible in the past or failed to do something and is living with the consequences of it every single day. Unlike Mami and now Sayaka, who are taken with the fantasy of being some sort of hero, Homura has zero illusions about that. Her worldview is just very, very bleak. It's like excessive kindness leads to weakness, reckless courage leads to carelessness, and there's just no reward for dedication of any kind. There's no point in trying to be a hero or trying to help people. Let's unpack that more. I think what Homura was essentially saying is that being too kind makes you vulnerable to exploitation, while being too brave makes you sloppy and prone to making mistakes, which is all very true. Her perspective on weakness is kind of similar to Kyouko's, but it's also very different in that Homura is more about guarding against yourself from being weak, as opposed to actively preying on the weak like Kyouko does. Like I said last time, I'm still convinced that Homura probably started out exactly like Madoka and Sayaka, full of hope and determination to save people. I think because this incredible power that she has now may have come from some sort of selfless wish that she had made back in the day. Homura's brand of cynicism feels like what happens when idealism gets systematically beat out of you over and over again. I think as she watched everyone she cared about get destroyed over and over, she was worn down until the most she could hope for was saving just one person, which, again, for whatever reason, happens to be Madoka. Even so, Homura is very frustrated with Madoka, and she's like, how many times do I have to save you before you take the hint to not care so much, you idiot? I think the answer is an infinite number of times, because I don't think Madoka will or can ever change. You know, our whole conversation about how there are certain traits about ourselves that we didn't really choose. And honestly, I don't think Homura would want her to change either. I wasn't sure what to make of Homura saying, like, I will not hold back against a fool. It seemed to suggest that even Madoka can make a choice that will turn Homura against her, or it might be a situation where Homura will take Madoka down for her own good. I don't know. I'm just really, really hoping and praying that we're not being set up for this final tragic showdown between Homura and Madoka. But it was weird for that line to kind of be thrown out there, and I feel like it's going to come back and bite us in the butt. So the next question is, what makes Madoka so different from everyone else? Like, why is she the one person that Homura feels is worth saving above all others? It might be her unusual ability to empathize with people, like the depth of compassion she has for them. It's been hinted at since episode 1 that this quality will be important for the story somehow. She isn't just naive, like she genuinely wants everyone to get along and believes that magical girls should work together instead of tear each other down. Still, Homura is like, you sweet, sweet summer child. The problem right now is Madoka hasn't figured out that the entire system is designed to disincentivize cooperation and foster competition. The math just doesn't math. There's only one grief seed per witch that's killed, but you have multiple magical girls who need them to cleanse their soul gems, to say nothing of the girls like Kyouko who hoard them. So it's kind of like this game of musical chairs, except the stakes are life and death, or life and become a witch and just be trapped in your own depression. I do think it is endearing that Madoka's brain is not wired to think in terms of scarcity and, zero-sum conflict. Instead, she is the type of person to look for a win-win solution. The big question is, though, whether that huge empathy of hers that makes her special will end up saving everyone, or if it will somehow be twisted by the system, as it tends to do. Meanwhile, to no one's surprise, Qubey continues to bank on whatever massive potential they see in Madoka. Every crisis that they engineer to pressure her into making a contract has played on her compassion or her concern for her friends. Just like with Sayaka, Qubey uses Madoka's strengths as weapons against her own better judgment. The late night conversation between Madoka and her mom turned out to be way more game-changing than I ever expected. First of all, though, like Dread Pirate MD pointed out, yay for this anime for having a relatively rare scene, I guess, where an adult actually talks to their child and gives them nuggets of wisdom. But yes, the ensuing question then we have to ask is, was Mum's advice helpful? It basically led to Madoka yeeting Sayaka's soul gem off a bridge, but I think the underlying wisdom behind the advice was interesting in terms of how it helps us understand what the show might be saying about moral complexity and moral grey areas. Madoka was essentially given a crash course on how the real world works, where good intentions don't always lead to good outcomes. Exhibit A, Sayaka. Sometimes loving someone means doing things that they'll hate you for. If someone you care about is on a self-destructive path, being respectful isn't always going to help. Like, you're going to have to do something drastic, even if it means hurting them in the short term to save them from something even worse. And that is a rather uncomfortable thought, especially for someone who is conflict avoidant, which I think Madoka is. This conversation felt pivotal not only because it led to Madoka throwing Sayaka away, but also because it seems to be setting her up for some sort of massive decision that she'll have to make down the line. The show keeps hammering home Madoka's empathy and compassion and her desire to save everyone. But her mum's very realist advice suggests that whatever choice she eventually will have to make won't be straightforwardly good, and as a result will be very difficult and uncomfortable for her to make. It might, for example, require her to hurt people that she cares about or make some sort of dictatorial decision for them that they would never make for themselves, for the sake of saving them. This conversation, I think, was Madoka being prepared for a world where perfect choices just don't exist, only necessary ones. The comment about mistakes being harder to make as you get older was particularly brutal because it's so true. When you're young, you can kind of afford to mess up because you've got decades to, course correct and rebuild broken relationships and sort of learn from your failures. But as an adult, you tend to have more to lose and less chances and time to fix things, and a lot more people's well-being depends on your ability to make the right call. It kind of cuts even deeper when you consider how it applies to the magical girls and how they are being forced into adult type decisions, decisions about life and death and sacrifice and survival while they're still just kids. They don't have the luxury of making mistakes and learning from them gradually as normal kids do. One wrong choice and you're either dead or you turn into a witch or you become depressed or all of the above. As I do every single time we come to watch these episodes, let's just update the mounting pile of evidence that Qubey is both terrifying and terrible. First, he casually just eats grief seeds and stores them in his body. Like, what? He is literally consuming corrupted souls of girls or witches. By now we're pretty sure that witches are just former magical girls, and kind of treating them with the same attitude as you would a midnight snack. That just added to this picture of an incredibly circular cycle of consumption and exploitation. Qubey is incentivized to recruit more magical girls because more girls means more use of magic, which means more corruption of soul gems, which creates more demand for grief seeds, which then produces more witches when girls can't cleanse their soul gems in time. Something that is exacerbated, of course, by girls feeling like they need to hoard seeds just to be safer, which then means both more grief seeds for Qubey to eat and the need for more magical girls to fight the new witches that have been created. And so the cycle just kind of goes on and on and on and on. Interesting side note, Mummy did not hoard grief seeds. It probably went against her own moral code, but also it could be that she was very talented. That suggests that there are ways around excessively using grief seeds or needing a lot of grief seeds because you might be able to use them in smarter ways, which is, I think, another likely reason why Homura thinks Sayaka makes for a terrible magical girl. It's not just because of her recklessness or because of her tendency to put herself and others in danger, but it's because she may need a lot more grief seeds just to keep her own soul gem clean, which is both wasteful and, given Sayaka's love of justice, comes at a terrible moral cost that would probably break her if she ever found out the truth about, witches and magical girls and that horrible cycle that keeps them locked into the system. We already talked about the lack of informed consent, how Qubey doesn't tell the girls at all that their souls will be extracted and that their bodies basically become corpses without their gems. We've also touched on how his manipulation is just very constant and subtle, and how he reframes every single violation to the girls as this sort of benefit. Given all that, I think the question actually isn't whether Qubey is evil. Classic evil at least acknowledges the humanity of its victims, even if it chooses to ignore or to violate it. For example, someone who tortures a person for pleasure understands that they are causing suffering and gets satisfaction from it. It's that recognition of the victim's capacity for pain that ironically affirms their humanity. Qubey, by contrast, operates from this completely alien perspective that doesn't even register human suffering as a thing. They're not choosing to be cruel as such, instead they are perpetuating suffering while being genuinely bewildered by human emotional responses to that cruelty. Arguably, I think that makes Qubey something that's worse than evil, because how can you argue with something that literally cannot comprehend why human souls and the bodies they come in have value? The way that Qubey looks at humans is the way that we, for example, look at trees who happen to be in the way of a new highway that we need to build. We don't stop and think about the tree's feelings as we cut it down. We kind of just do it because it has to be done, and that's how things have always been, and it serves our purpose. Finally, what on earth is the Walpurgisnacht? So I did look it up. I was surprised to learn that it's an actual event or this celebration that takes place on April the 30th And in German folklore, it was the night when witches would gather on some sort of mountaintop and when evil powers would be at their peak because the barrier between the supernatural and the normal worlds would weaken. So, in the context of the show, it sounds like Homura is on some deadline to figure out how to deal with like a very apocalyptic kind of witch or this witch gathering that's going to take advantage of a weakened barrier to come and destroy everything, I assume. Maybe it's when all the witches in existence gather and they combine their powers and their beings to create one gigantic powerful witch. We shall see. Madoka Magica episode 7 in 3, 2, 1, play. Just so casually chucking it on a bedside table. I just oil snaked you. Always read your T's and C's, guys. I mean, you're just meatbags and I made you into something better. Ah, he's doing the whole you don't know what's good for you. Oh my god. Qubey can control their pain factors. This is such a weird torture scene. I mean, I know they're making a point, but isn't this just a form of gaslighting? No. I am glad though that the sinister nature of Qubey is now in full display. Like it's not just hinted at now, it's actually just fully out there. That's not to say that Qubey knows that they're being horrible and just completely dismissive of human feelings and emotion. Because they can't. Again, I think that's just some weird alien life form that just will never get it. But at least everyone knows now, including Sayaka. I think the whole talk about how you don't have to feel pain, and that's a good thing. Feeling pain is also another one of those things that makes us fundamentally human. If you don't feel pain, you don't have any inhibitions that sort of define how you set your boundaries and stuff, whether that's physical pain or emotional pain. So, what Kyouko said about being turned into zombies is essentially what they are. Interesting that they're using a cello, not the violin, not what Kyouko plays. Yeah. I mean, and to every other magical girl. Don't confuse gratitude with responsibility. She has these very wise quips. Because she's done this millions of times. It's an interesting, like, pattern on her fingernail. What happens if you just like squeeze Qubey? Like, I'm assuming Qubey is also immortal. Kyoko. We always knew Coco was a softie. It's like as soon as Sayaka stopped with the idealistic, you know, fantasy of what a magical girl is, Kyoko's like, okay, now I can handle you. Hmm. Okay, do everything for yourself. Very existentialist kind of outlook. Who eats so many apples? And you can see your own reflection in them. I don't know. I would not eat an apple where you could do that. I mean, oh my god. He's like pasta. Oh my god, why are they doing it in like witch form, witch visual form? Oh, oh my god. Wait, how old is she? Because this looks like it happened hundreds of years ago. Like their clothing to the building styles. Oh, ooh. There you go. That's Kyouko with the wanting to save everyone in the world. Don't know. My dad sounds like really prideful. Okay, that turned a real dark corner really fast. I mean, how else could this have ended? Mm. Which is smart, you can never truly read other people's minds. Hmm. Yeah, it's more about like using your wish, right? Like how you use your powers. It's like sunk cost. I don't know. I don't think Sayaka's gonna find a way out of this. Okay, that's remarkably clear-eyed from Sayaka. Driven, of course, by her memories of Mummy. Like, there are different ways to go about um, thinking about the powers you have. It's like, we don't have to pay for some crappy apples. Oh, that is such an angry vibe. I was half expecting her to throw it at the back of Sayaka's head. Also, the symbolic imagery of like a bitten apple, right? Like, going back to creation and the original fall, and how you can't ever go back and unmake that mistake. Okay, it feels like she's kind of worked it out in her head. She's like, yes, I didn't know what I got into, but no regrets. Seeing him every day is going to be hard. Hmm. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. That creepy, creepy music. Oh my god. Sayaka's gonna spiral into a depression because her best friend is in love with, like, her crush. Oh my god, she's gonna turn into a witch because of this. Oh no, that's so not worth it. She knows too, though. Hitomi's good. She's just trying to lay all the cards out. She's not. I just don't see this panning out in a positive way. Like, I just, you never felt it from Kyosuke? I don't know. It might be different now that he's all healed and stuff. Why does Qubey have to be there? Oh, Madoka. Just like guardian angel. Mm. Ooh. Whoa, that is a real intrusive thought. Hmm. That's interesting. Do their bodies like literally lose all warmth because everything's contained inside the gem now? Could you tell if you hugged a magical girl? Wow. I don't think you're fine. Oh, I thought she was going to go confess to Kyosuke. Okay. Is she letting Sayaka have it? What is this? It's like the Hydra. Oh, nice. I love that she has those like launch pads, like the magic launch pads. Oh, she caught her. Oh my gosh, she's getting torn up. I think she's like, well, I can't feel any pain anyway. I'm not a human. Madoka, you like oh, okay. Man, that was a great episode in terms of showing the downward spiral of Sayaka. Because she started out not knowing how to think about her new form now, I guess, acknowledging that she is quote unquote a zombie in the sense that her body is not where her self is contained anymore. She kind of figured her way out of that, like, mind trap, I guess. But then the Hitomi thing really threw her for a loop. And now she's like, we did talk about how what would bring Sayaka down is like the yawning gap between her idea of what a magical girl is, like the heroic ideal, versus the actual reality. And I think it was the fact that the intrusive thought that crossed her mind about how, oh, it would have been nice maybe if I hadn't saved Hitomi so that then I could have Kyosuke for myself. That was what did her in, I think, because she realized that she's no better than the other magical girls like Kyouko or Homura. She's been staunchly criticizing them for being selfish assholes when really she was one herself in her mind. And it's not that they're selfish assholes, it's just that they are still very human despite not having human bodily forms anymore. Watching Sayaka's whole breakdown this episode was just brutal and depressing, and now I'm really sad. She started out with this completely romanticized view of what being a magical girl is. And even midway through the episode, where she gave this great speech about how, well, she acknowledges what she is now and she's got these powers and she's going to still use it for good. But then it kind of just devolved really quickly because of the Hitomi thing. She had a slight grip and I think was accepting slowly that she is basically a walking corpse. But that grip just totally was undone when she realized or had to deal with the irony that her wish to heal Kyosuke, the thing that she thought was this pure, selfless act of love, became the very thing that made it impossible for her to ever be with him. Despite what she said in her words about having no regrets, how can you not regret something, though, that fundamentally has destroyed the very thing that you've been hoping for? Because 100%, if she had known prior that turning into a magical girl would mean turning into this quote unquote monster, she never would have done it. She never would have made that contract because it would have threatened her hope of being with Yosuke. Now that she can't undo it, that was why she completely broke down. Any hope of her actually gradually accepting the reality of becoming a magical girl is now gone. She's just completely flipped and something animalistic emerged. Something really broke inside of her. It's like she's saying, I'm a monster now, so fuck it. Like, why not lean into it? Which is kind of what Kyouko advised her to do, but it's taken on a very destructive form. Like, remember when she first fought the familiar, I think, when she saved Madoka? I remember it being very graceful, like sword work and just these very like bright, heroic poses. And I think the music as well was really triumphant. And now it's like a complete 180 from that. She was just hacking away at the witch and just laughing away manically and very significantly allowing herself to get stabbed a million times over and impaled and whatnot, because she, again, is embracing the fact that magical girls literally cannot feel pain if they so choose. It is definitely not heroic anymore. We are off that boat. It's now fully turned into the horror show. The really sad thing about abandoning herself to this lack of ability to feel pain is that she's fighting like someone who has completely given up on self-preservation. It is screaming, I no longer deserve to exist because I'm a monster. So, whatever. The only happy factor I feel from this episode, and even that was kind of depressing, was seeing Kyouko just kind of let down her guard a bit and kind of take Sayaka under her wing, which was very sweet of her. And the whole backstory of her dad basically spiraling into madness and alcoholism as soon as he found out that the reason for his religious success was because of his daughter's wish. There's a whole bunch of trauma there to unpack, including the absolute depth of abandonment Kyoko would have felt when her dad completely rejected her, blamed her for everything, and then called her a witch, despite how everything she'd done was for his sake. You know, it was a child's naive desire to stop her parents' grief and suffering. Yeah, okay, that's just like double sadness now. Depressing Madoka Magica, episode 8. Here we go in 3, 2, 1, play. Do you not get a sense that she's letting out her own disgust at herself onto that poor witch? Okay, that was an interesting religious or some sort of royal figure. Oh my god, the head tilt. Madoka's like, I don't want to go home with you. What just happened? Her tone completely changed, like some sort of a split personality. Yeah, that was odd. Is it that inherent in every magical girl is like their normal side and then the witch side? The side that is just totally weighed down and crushed by the depressed reality that they find themselves in? I don't know. Qubey. You know, the question that we're just always asking every single episode is what kind of system turns out girls like Homura and Kyouko and now Sayaka, you know? You meet them after they've gone through just utter emotional breakage. Um and you're never like, oh, they were always like that. They were always these horrible people, you know, from the beginning. You know that it's the result of being crushed by some kind of system. And so now I feel like now that we're past the halfway point in the season, we've sort of got all the pieces together. Not all, but most of the pieces together to answer that question. You know, it's a sort of system that draws you in without really telling you what you've gotten yourself into. And then once you realize you've been turned into a monster and your hopes and dreams are actually shattered now, you can't get out. This is what happens. Right. And because of her healing power, I mean, that's also just made it worse, Ian. I'm just a rock. Excuse me. Even rocks have feelings. Oh no. Oh no. The guilt trip. Madoka doesn't deserve this. But also you kind of get why Sayaka is like this. It's all completely said out of hurt. Okay. She hasn't cleansed the corruption from all of that crazy magic use. I've got gridded maps. Where are they? Why are the paintings moving like that? Mm. Mm. Just ignore, move on. Maybe she'll become like the most powerful witch they've ever seen. Just because the bigger the fall, you know. Be gone. I love Homura so much. Ugh, the way that tail just disappeared into the dark. So they can kill Qubey. I guess they just reapparate or something, regenerate. I mean, Homura was the one who said you should give up on Sayaka, but I don't think she herself has actually. I think she still thinks Sayaka can be saved. Oh no, oh no. Nope. Just the perfect storm. You know, Sayaka's like skulking nearby. Because she knows Hitomi told her this is where she confessed him. It is amazing that we're on to episode 8 now and Madoka has still like resisted becoming a magical girl. I guess that is what makes her special. It's like she's fighting her own delusions. I know it. I knew she was going to give her a spare one. This is why Homura was like, you are going to make a terrible magical girl. You have too much pride. How is she still saying this? There's like this weird voice in her head. I mean, she's totally just lost. That she knows of. Uh, I mean, the reason is different, but the outcome is the same. You know, that Madoka is not sad. She wasn't gonna kill her though. She just said, I don't want Madoka seeing you suffer. Unless she was like, I'm gonna kill you and then not tell Madoka that this is how you died. Flash grenade. Why am I just having all these tricks up her sleeve? does does anyone actually talk like this? Ugh. Um, she's like, these are the people I swore to protect. Is this it? That's it. The music notes. Yes, of course. Why though? Is the question. Yeah. I mean, we kind of guessed at it, like the fact that she has such deep empathy for people. You change the world. Oh, okay. I mean, clearly Homura knows there's something special about her. What if it's like, what if her potential power is linked to how much Homura really seems to gun for her, like really loves her? The power of love. What? To save everyone? Are we actually talking about Madoka becoming a god? Homura, that was smooth and freaking scary. Ah, it's alright. It's fine. I.e., me. What's that TV screen? Madoka's like, you came on too strong. I'm gonna go now. Bye. Oh god. Oh my god. Bloody Qubey. Of course. Ah, of course. Oh, of course they just consume their like remains. And of course their soul is housed somewhere else. No, Qubey's learning too. The fate of becoming a god? A soulless god? Whoa, man, I feel like Rich has been smacked in the face with a whole bunch of lore. The incubator. I mean, it makes sense. They eat grief seeds. Kyouko. Kyoko's still trying to cheer Sayaka up. The friend we all need. Will she take a grief seed from Kyoko? Kyoko regretting those words now. Well, that was the shape of Madoka, wasn't it? So there's teardrops, and then she'll literally be drowning. And so, like, is she gonna create that whole witch labyrinth around her? Oh, okay, I just realized something. So we saw that this was where Sayaka was going to end up. Kind of like a foregone conclusion that she would completely spiral and then turn into a witch. Her lashing out at Madoka, basically guilt tripping her for not making a contract when she knows that she could be an even more powerful magical girl and help fight witches. It was cruel. Like, it was objectively cruel on the surface, but it also came from a really, really deep place of self-hatred. So she's corrupting her soul gem at a faster clip than normal, because she is, I don't know if you could say like bad at being a magical girl, but she's just not as talented as channeling the magic. And also she is burning up a lot of magic doing the whole reckless thing that she does when she gets into these fights. But then I just realized when Homura gave her that grief seed and Sayaka just kind of kicked it away, it wasn't only because she hates Homura and everything she stands for. It's really twisted because her disgust at herself for having those bitter thoughts about Hitomi and Kyosuke has made her swing even harder towards the selfless hero fence, which means that she will not let familiars turn into witches before she kills them because she doesn't want to be associated with the whole Kyouko as well. Why don't you let it just turn into a witch so that you can get a grief seed for yourself? Because that would be selfish. She also will refuse to use any grief seed offered to her because that also means consuming something that has been produced as a result of people suffering, which is also a selfish thing. And so it's very noble in theory, but that's exactly what's killing her inside. She is so horrified by the human emotions that ran through her, the jealousy of Hitomi, the resentment that her wish has caused her to forever kiss goodbye to this dream of being with Kyosuke. All these selfish thoughts that she doubles down on this very impossible standard of selflessness. But the more she tries to, I guess, stick to that standard, the more her soul gem becomes corrupt because that's just how soul gems work. She is literally being destroyed by her own idealism and stubbornness, unable to accept that being human means being messy and complicated and having thoughts that may not be 100% pure. God, now that we've finally come full circle from normal girl to magical girl to now witch, that just completes the circle of tragedy. It was precisely because she couldn't get over the fact or forgive herself for being just human. It also didn't help that she overheard that terrible, cringe conversation between those two assholes on the train. That was just the cherry on top. Like, I gave up my soul and my humanity for a bunch of assholes. And also, let's talk about how freaking glorious Madoka came to making the deal with Qubey. She was drowning in guilt over not having gone after Sayaka. And Qubey was, of course, right there with this whole "you could save everyone" pitch. And the fact that Homura came bursting through and just completely broke down in tears because of her frustration at Madoka insisting on ignoring the fact that she has people, i.e. Homura, who are trying to prevent that very thing from happening. Clearly the stakes are very, very high. And it all centers around Madoka and the potential of her power as a magical girl. Not even magical girl now. We're talking about an all-powerful god who has the power to reverse the process of a girl becoming a magical girl and then a witch, but just at the small cost of Madoka's own soul and humanity. Does Madoka have something to do with the Walpurgisnacht? The timelines seem to be converging at this point. And clearly Homura has been through this a dozen, if more so, times. The Walpurgisnacht is what Homura is focused on. And she's also been focused on stopping Madoka from becoming a magical girl. So I wonder if the two are actually the one and the same thing. I was also wondering about Qubey because obviously his physical body was shot to tatters by Homura's shotgun. Is it a case of like Horcruxes where if you find enough of Qubey's bodies, you can actually squeeze the life out of him because his soul has been divided up into so many of these physical hosts? That's probably just a fantasy though, because it seems like he has probably thousands, if not more, of these physical shells. So it's not like Qubey is concerned that someone like Homura is going to hunt down every single one of those Horcruxes. There's definitely a lot to think about in these two episodes, and it's just kind of wrapping up everything that we've learnt. Each episode, there's been just a slow unfurling and a reveal of one more aspect of this entire magical girl system. And I feel like it's time to sort of step back and put together how messed up this whole thing is and how intelligently designed on Qubey's part it is to entrap girls and to make sure that none of them ever escape the depressing cycle that it seems to set off. Thanks, guys. I know I keep saying I'm depressed when I watch this, but it also is paired with a deep fascination for everything that this show throws up and makes us question about humanity and just about life's purpose in general. I hope you guys take care and I'll see you for the next video.